Welcome back to Study Hole, everybody. Ready for another deep dive?
Always. What are we tackling today?
Well, let's talk about something that's been making waves. The return to in-person work.
Oh, yeah. That's a hot topic for sure.
Especially for federal employees.
Right.
We've actually got some pretty interesting source material to dig into for this one.
Oh.
Yeah. We have a White House memo straight from the source, so to speak.
Wow.
And a policy analysis document that really breaks down the arguments for and against this whole back to the office push.
Sounds like we've got our work cut out for us.
We do, but that's what we're here for, right? To break it all down and try to make sense of it together.
Absolutely. So where do we start?
Well, let's start with the image of this White House memo.
Okay.
It's dated January 20th, 2025. And the title is pretty straightforward. Return to in-person work.
No beating around the bush there.
Nope. And for those who want to see it for themselves, the URL is right there on the page.
Oh, that's handy.
Yeah, it's https://www.whitehouse.gov, Presidential Actions 20R2501, Return to In-Person Work.
So what does the memo actually say?
Well, it's a pretty clear directive from the top. It's basically telling the heads of all departments and agencies in the executive branch that they need to end those remote work arrangements.
Okay.
And bring their employees back to their duty stations full-time.
Full-time, wow.
Yep, as soon as practicable are the exact words.
Is it practicable, huh? That's a little vague, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, which makes me wonder what that actually means for federal agencies and their employees.
Right, like are people scrambling to get back to their desks right this second?
That's a good question.
Or is there a more, I don't know, a more gradual approach happening?
Well, the memo does mention exemptions.
Oh.
So it's not like a one-size-fits-all, everybody back tomorrow kind of thing.
I see, so there's some wiggle room.
Yeah. Agency heads can grant exemptions if they think it's necessary.
So that raises another question then.
What's that?
What factors might influence these exemption decisions?
That's something we should definitely keep in mind as we go through this.
Agreed.
Now let's get into this policy analysis document.
Okay.
It's called Return to In-Person Work, PC.pdf.
Catchy.
Right. And it really lays out the arguments for this return to office mandate in a pretty comprehensive way.
Okay, so what are some of the key points?
Well, they start off by talking about all the potential benefits of in-person work.
Like what?
Things like enhanced collaboration.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that one a lot.
Yeah, and strengthening workplace culture.
Oh.
And even some economic benefits.
Interesting.
So let's break these down one by one. When they talk about enhanced collaboration,
yeah,
what exactly do they mean?
So the document argues that when people are physically present in the workplace, it kind of facilitates a certain flow of communication.
Okay.
Like brainstorming and problem solving. That's really hard to replicate remotely.
I can see that.
Like imagine you're trying to tackle some complex policy challenge. Wouldn't it be easier to just gather around a whiteboard with your colleagues and hash things out in real time?
Right.
I mean, email chains and video calls can only go so far, you know?
Yeah, I get that. But I do wonder if that same energy might stifle creativity for some people.
That's a good point.
What about those folks who actually thrive in quiet, focused environments?
Right, right.
Wouldn't forcing them back to a bustling office be counterproductive?
You're right. That's a really valid point. And it's something the analysis doesn't really address. It's this assumption that this kind of forced collaboration benefits everyone equally, which might not be the case.
Right, because individual work styles and preferences definitely come into play here.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's move on to the next point then.
Yeah.
Strengthening workplace culture.
Okay.
What's the thinking there?
Well, the idea is that in-person interactions just naturally foster a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose.
I could see that.
Like all those water cooler moments, you know, casual conversations, spontaneous collaborations.
Great.
Those things contribute to a stronger sense of community in the workplace.
I see.
And the analysis suggests that this is particularly important for government agencies, where a shared commitment to public service is so crucial.
That makes sense. But couldn't you argue that a strong online community could also foster a sense of belonging?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, so many companies have created these thriving virtual spaces where employees can connect and share ideas, support each other.
It's a good point. So then the question becomes, how do we make sure that remote workers aren't excluded from this supposed cultural resurgence?
Exactly. It's like we need to find a way to maintain that sense of connection and shared purpose, regardless of physical location.
Yeah, right.
And again, The document doesn't really get into how to do that.
It's a missed opportunity for sure.
It is. Agencies will need to figure that out carefully if they want to keep their workforce cohesive and engaged. All right, let's talk about the economic benefits then.
Okay.
What's the argument there?
So the analysis talks about this ripple effect.
Okay.
When federal employees return to the office,
Yeah.
it leads to more activity in surrounding businesses.
Right, like all those places that rely on foot traffic from office workers.
Exactly. Coffee shops, restaurants, local retail, you name it.
It makes sense.
And then there's the argument that it could also reduce home office expenses for employees.
Oh, interesting.
So less money spent on things like electricity and high-speed internet.
I see. But it seems like those economic arguments could have counterpoints too, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, for one,
Yeah.
the rise of remote work has led to a growth in businesses and services.
Oh, yeah, catering specifically to remote workers.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that could offset some of the losses.
Right.
And the money employees save by not having a home office might be eaten up by increased commuting costs.
Good point.
Not to mention childcare if they were relying on those flexible work arrangements.
Yeah, that's a really important consideration.
Yeah.
So it's not as simple as saying everyone back to the office equals economic boom.
Definitely not.
We have to look at all the ripple effects, both positive and negative.
Absolutely.
All right, so we've talked about the potential benefits. Now let's flip the script and talk about the concerns.
Sounds good.
The document acknowledges that remote work has been pretty productive for many employees.
Yeah, there's research to back that up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially for those who thrive in focused, independent work environments.
Right, right.
So doesn't that make this whole push to return to the office seem a bit counterintuitive?
It does raise some questions.
Like, if the data shows that remote work has been effective for a lot of people,
Yeah.
why are we pushing for a change that could actually hinder efficiency?
It's a good question, and the analysis doesn't really offer a clear answer. Like, is there something beyond just productivity driving this decision?
Maybe.
It's definitely something to think about.
It is, especially as we delve into the potential consequences of this mandate.
Okay, what else do they bring up?
Well, there's the impact on work-life balance,
Right, that's a big one.
which a lot of people have come to appreciate about remote work.
Absolutely.
So the analysis acknowledges that getting rid of the option to work remotely could make things incredibly difficult for employees who rely on that flexibility.
For sure.
You know, for things like childcare, elder care, or other personal responsibilities.
Yeah, and let's not forget the stress of commuting.
Right. That can take a toll on both time and well-being.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't ignore the potential consequences for morale and job satisfaction either.
It's like we're trying to force a traditional work model onto a workforce that's already adapted to a much more flexible way of life.
It's a valid concern.
What other concerns do they raise?
Well, they talk about the potential for a decline in employee satisfaction,
Okay.
which makes sense. People who've gotten used to working remotely
Yeah.
might resist this change, you know?
Sure.
They might feel like it's unnecessary or even counterproductive.
Right.
And for some employees, like those with disabilities or those who live far away from their duty stations,
Right.
returning to in-person work could be really challenging.
Absolutely. We have to consider those accessibility issues.
Yes, definitely.
And make sure everyone has equitable access to their work, no matter their circumstances.
Agreed.
And this mandate seems to be doing the opposite, potentially creating more barriers.
Yeah, the analysis touches on that briefly, but it doesn't really offer any solutions.
It's definitely something that needs more attention.
I agree.
And then there were the financial and health implications.
Yes.
Reopening offices comes with costs, you know,
Of course.
increased spending on utilities, cleaning, office supplies.
All that stuff.
And from a health perspective, can we really ignore the risks of bringing so many people back into shared workspaces?
Right, especially with those ongoing public health concerns.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, the analysis mentions these points, but it doesn't really get into the specifics.
It doesn't, and I think that leaves a lot of unanswered questions.
Like, how much is this actually going to cost?
Yeah, and our agency's going to be able to handle that burden.
Especially those already struggling with budget constraints.
It's a real concern.
So it seems like we've uncovered more questions than answers so far.
It does feel that way.
We've explored some strong arguments on both sides, but it's clear that this is a complex issue with no easy solutions.
Absolutely. And I think we've only just scratched the surface.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to unpack here, especially when we consider the long-term implications of this mandate.
Exactly.
Not just for the government, but for the future of work as a whole.
That's where things get really interesting.
They do. And that's what we'll be diving into next time.
Can't wait.
So stay tuned for part 2, where we'll explore those long-term implications.
Okay.
And try to make sense of what this all means for the future of work.
Sounds good. So we've been looking at this mandate like under a microscope, really examining all the immediate pros and cons.
Right.
But I think it's time to zoom out a little.
I agree. We need to consider the bigger picture here.
Exactly.
What are the long-term implications of this push to return to in-person work?
Right.
Not just for the federal government, but for other sectors too.
Well, I think we can look at this mandate as a potential turning point.
Okay.
While it only directly affects federal employees,
Yeah,
a lot of companies look to the government for guidance on workplace policies.
that's true.
So this could be the start of a broader shift away from remote work and back towards that more traditional office-centric model.
So you're saying the era of remote work is coming to an end?
I don't know if I'd go that far,
Okay.
but it's definitely a possibility. This mandate could embolden more employers to follow suit.
Yeah, especially those who are already leaning in that direction.
Exactly.
But what does this mean for all the people who've embraced the flexibility of working from home?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. And it
Yeah.
makes me think about the impact on talent recruitment and retention.
Oh, for sure.
In today's job market, companies that offer remote or hybrid options have a real advantage,
They do.
especially when it comes to attracting and keeping top talent.
Absolutely. And that's especially relevant for government agencies.
Right, because they're already facing recruitment challenges.
Right.
So if they're forced to adopt this rigid, fully in-person model,
Yeah.
they risk losing out on skilled professionals
It's a valid concern.
who are looking for more accommodating arrangements.
Yeah.
So we could end up in a situation where the government can't compete for the best people because they're not offering the same level of flexibility as the private sector.
It's possible.
That seems like a pretty big problem.
It is. And it highlights this trade-off that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, we might see some short-term gains in terms of collaboration and oversight,
Okay.
but at what cost?
Right. Are we sacrificing long-term agility and the ability to attract a diverse and skilled workforce?
Those are important questions.
The policy analysis does mention exemption policies and hybrid work models,
Yeah.
but those seem like Band-Aids on a bigger issue.
Right. Like, how realistic is it to expect agencies to implement those solutions effectively?
Across the board, yeah.
That's a huge challenge. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one thing to talk about flexibility and hybrid models in theory,
Yeah.
but putting those ideas into practice across these massive organizations like federal agencies, that's a whole other ballgame.
It is.
It requires a huge shift in mindset, not to mention the resources and infrastructure to support it.
So are we really ready for that kind of transformation?
That's the million-dollar question.
It is.
We have the technology to support a more flexible workforce,
Yeah.
but are we culturally ready to embrace it? This mandate might force our hand, It could accelerate a transition that was already happening anyway.
It's like we're conducting this giant experiment
In a way, yeah.
with millions of employees as the subjects.
That's a good way to put it.
And the outcome is going to have a ripple effect across all sectors.
It will.
So we need to proceed with caution,
Absolutely.
carefully weighing the potential benefits and drawbacks.
Agreed.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the immediate impacts to the broader implications for the future of work.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I want to bring it back to our listeners for a moment.
Of course.
This isn't just some abstract policy debate.
Right.
This is something that could have a very real impact on people's lives and careers.
Absolutely.
So as we think about this potential shift,
Yeah.
I think it's important to ask ourselves some tough questions.
Okay.
What does the future of work look like to you? What kind of environment would allow you to thrive,
Right.
both professionally and personally?
That's a great question for everyone to consider.
We've been focusing a lot on the policy side of things.
Yeah.
But I want to bring it back to the human element here for a second.
Right. That's crucial.
I mean, can you talk a bit about what this mandate means for actual employees?
Well, I think we need to acknowledge the anxiety and uncertainty a lot of people are feeling right now.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, for some folks, going back to the office after years of remote work, it's a pretty daunting prospect.
It is.
There are concerns about childcare, commutes,
Yeah.
losing that flexibility.
Right.
These are all very real and valid concerns.
Absolutely. And it's not just about logistics either, right?
No, not at all.
For a lot of people, remote work has become so intertwined with their well-being.
Yeah,
Their ability to manage stress, find a better work-life balance.
exactly.
So this mandate kind of disrupts those carefully constructed routines and boundaries.
It does.
And let's not forget the social aspect, too.
Right.
I mean, for some folks, the workplace was their main source of social interaction.
Yeah, for sure.
So losing those connections can be really isolating and anxiety-provoking, for sure.
Definitely.
So it's like we're asking people to reevaluate their priorities, weigh the benefits of in-person collaboration against the value they found in remote work.
It's a tough choice.
It is, and I imagine there's no easy answer.
No, there isn't. And it really highlights the need for empathy, from both employers and colleagues as we go through this transition.
Yeah.
We need open communication, flexible arrangements, and a real focus on employee well-being.
Right. To help mitigate the potential negative impacts.
Exactly.
This brings us back to that idea of reimagining work, doesn't it?
It does.
Like, can we find a middle ground? A way to get the benefits of both in-person and remote work without sacrificing what makes each approach valuable.
I think that's the challenge and the opportunity in front of us.
Yeah.
This mandate could be the catalyst for a more thoughtful approach to the workplace.
Okay.
We might see more hybrid models, flexible schedules.
A greater focus on outcomes rather than just showing up.
Right.
And technology will play a key role in all of this, enabling collaboration and communication regardless of location.
So it's like we're being forced to evolve in a way.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
To break free from that traditional office model and create a work environment that actually works for everyone.
Exactly. One that's tailored to the needs of both individuals and organizations.
It's exciting to think about the possibilities.
It is.
But I also know there will be challenges along the way.
Oh, for sure. There will be bumps in the road. But I'm optimistic.
Okay.
I think we can learn from this experience.
Yeah.
And create a better future of work.
What do you think that looks like?
Well, one that's more flexible, more inclusive, and ultimately more fulfilling for everyone.
That's a great goal to strive for.
It is.
Well, it looks like we've reached the end of our deep dive.
We have.
We've explored the ins and outs of this return to office mandate.
Weighed the potential pros and cons, and really tried to understand what this means for the future of work.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
It has. I hope our listeners found it insightful and engaging.
Me too. And as always, we encourage everyone to keep the conversation going.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on the future of work?
Right. How do you envision the ideal work environment?
Share your insights and perspectives. We're all in this together.
That's right. Until next time, fellow deep divers.
Keep exploring.
Keep questioning.
And keep learning.
See you next time.